Welcome back to episode 3 of the Rambling podcast with myself, Ellen, and my mate, Mandy, where we talk about everything and nothing and recovery and the rest. And today we are going to be sharing, Mandy is going to be sharing Mandy's story. Um, dun, dun, dun. How are you feeling, Mandy?
A little bit like I'm not sure I'm going to fit this all in 40 minutes, but I'm going to try and
Okay, so if you can speed up.
yeah.
It's an interesting one. We were just talking before the podcast, like, oh, what are we gonna share? Where from? So Mandy, yeah, where do you want to share your story from?
Well, when I was born, um, well, I guess it's interesting because I've been telling my story. I made a kind of promise to myself when I got sober that I would use my voice if I could, to lessen stigma and shame by like openly talking about my experiences with alcohol. So I've told my story a fair few times, but like my story has loads of different elements that have kind of come in the last kind of year or so, I'd say. Um, so to kind of, you know, summarize my drinking, I tried alcohol when I was a really young kid. My parents um, were kind of doing the self-sufficiency thing. We didn't have any money, but we lived in a kind of ramble shank. I'm not sure that's a word. Um, like house where we had quite a bit of land and used to kind of grow our own vegetables and stuff like that. And mum and dad used to make their own wine. And it used to be my special treat that I used to be able to, when they would sort of move the wine from one bottle to another, which you have to do because of the sediment. I used to be able to like suck the tube to like get the, air out of the tube in order for it to like move into the next bottles. And I, can distinctly remember my dad sort of having to be like, okay, that's enough, Mandy, was always like, sucking it. Um, yeah, that was my first sort of taste. So we lived out in kind of the middle of nowhere in Suffolk. So I was quite a free child. I have really good memories of that time. I do remember feeling lonely, and I was very, very sensitive. So I used to have a lot of nightmares. I would, um, get very scared by like scary films and things like that. But I also was like, able to live in my kind of fantasy land. I like wrote loads of stories, would, create kind of just imaginary friends, and just I was quite kind of, yeah, certainly kind of felt quite free. And then we moved to Gloucestershire when I was 8. And I think that's when I realized that like I was a bit different. I was in my kind of jumble sale, Laura Ashley kind of, or a dress my mum had made or whatever. And then, the people at school were in their kind of catalogue, clothes that were all clean and nice. And that's, I think, when I started thinking like, oh, I'm not good, I'm not good enough as I am, basically. So I used to tell loads of lies when I was a kid. I used to like, make everything bigger, I mean, I still have the same best mates that I had when I moved to Stroud, so since the age of 8. And they still kind of laugh at me that I said that I was Australian and had loads of brothers and sisters, and they were like, well, your brother's in our school, so that's I don't know where all the others are, and I probably tried to pretend to do an accent or something. Um, and I was always really attracted to people that kind of, were a bit on the edge. So even in primary school, I used to go out with some people that used to shoplift, like, smoking, kind of drinking from, their parents' cabinets, those kind of free homes where they didn't have a lot of parental sort of support, um, people that were a little bit troubled that needed looking after. That was kind of like the definitely what I kind of felt like I was meant to be with them, but I didn't really understand why.
Okay.
And then, yes, I started smoking in primary school, drank a few times, I think at the end of primary
Primary
school.
school. So what age was that?
Well, it's like 12, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so then into secondary school, I think we were regularly kind of drinking at parties and stuff like that, fairly regularly from the age of like 14. Definitely like blacked out fairly quickly, and I can, and smoking weed from that age as well. And then I mean it was the 90s. I grew up in a very kind of alternative town. It was really easy to get kind of drugs and alcohol. I had friends in the business, so to speak. Quickly moved on from like drinking cider, in the park to smoking weed pretty much, most days after school, and then quickly into taking like ecstasy and cocaine at like rave parties and stuff like that. Um, and it all kind of felt fairly kind of normal. I mean, looking back now, I don't think I ever had a normal relationship with anything. I think I definitely ended up in, quite dangerous situations. I would always be seeking to be like included in stuff, regardless of like who the people were. So there's a few times now I look back and, my kind of best mates would gone home or they would have like not followed, and I would just end up with like really like quite hard kids, and then I'd end up carrying drugs for them and then losing them and then getting myself into trouble with it, just like there's just a lot of chaos all the time. And then yeah, that was kind of how we were, 16 through to um 25, I guess. Regularly.
What was the drug of choice at that kind of age, that 16 to 25? Was it alcohol or do you remember having a
Not
favorite?
really. I mean, like, because I didn't really like how alcohol made me out of control. Like, I definitely liked to be in control of things. So, um, but I was quite poor. So, I mean, I really like Coke, but like, I couldn't, get my hands on enough of it, luckily, for that to be my, first addiction. But certainly I would have, if I could have done. I mean, I had a drug dealer boyfriend and he would not let me have as much as I wanted. We a lot of ecstasy because we were, going to a lot of rave parties. So I didn't really drink that much at that point. I would just drink water. Um, and I
So did you
actually
have any at
go on.
that point? Did you have any awareness at that point that like, my personality tends to like seek this out or not?
No, not at all. Um, and and I think there's a lot of people that I grew up with probably that, have struggled, do struggle, do question their like use, now
Mhm.
because I definitely kind of insulated myself in a group of people that were all, pretty similar. Um, and then before I went, I wasn't doing very well at school. I was often in trouble. I didn't like authority. I was often getting kicked out. I mean, this is one of the major realizations that I've had in the last year is that, I do have ADHD. I did all the testing this year, and now all of that makes a lot more sense, that kind of looking for the edges of things, not, like impulse control, um, not sort of being able to reach my potential in school because I couldn't concentrate. I didn't like being told what to do, that kind of defiance. Um, and I had a real moment when I got that diagnosis of kind of like, you know, sort of a real puzzle in the a real piece of the puzzle and just sort of a bit of acceptance, I guess. Um, and then, yeah, then I went traveling when I was 18. So the idea was to go away for a year before I started uni. That was a very traumatic period. I had a very serious, violent sexual assault when I was traveling in Mexico, um, which after it happened, I said to my friend who was there, I was like, I never want to speak about this again. And I just buried it basically. And I didn't tell anyone, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't get any help. And I buried it for about 15 years before I actually kind of got any help with it. And then we got back. So we had a, like, I don't, I was pretty disassociated through that whole trip, I think.
You
And
continued with that trip, right? You didn't come home after
yeah,
the
no.
trip.
Yeah. So that happened, that happened at the beginning of the trip when we were in Mexico and I was with one friend and she came back to England. Apparently I wrote some letters to people about it. Apparently I gave a letter to my friend who I met, who I was doing the rest of the trip with, to kind of tell her that she read on the plane. Like, I don't remember any of this. And this has been told to me more than once, and for a very long time I couldn't like absorb the information. Um, and yeah, and then we went to like Australia, Thailand, Nepal. We were away for another like 5 months or something. And then when I got back, I think that's when my relationship with drugs and alcohol spiraled to a different level. I also had a one night stand with a friend of mine at the end of that summer when I got back. Went to university, didn't know that I was pregnant, had to have an abortion in my first term of university. Um, so it was quite a lot of trauma. Um, and and then at uni, I kind of I was smoking weed every day, drinking, doing drugs. But again, it was semi kind of in line with my mates and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, I got a boyfriend back in Stroud, who was a really like gentle, kind of nice guy, and I think that really kind of helped me. Um, Certainly when we were together for about 2.5 years, and when we split up, I split up with him. Um, I think that's the first time that I used alcohol as a pain relief because
Okay.
I would like go to the shop, buy a bottle of wine, drink it on my own to like numb the fuck out, basically. So that was another like check-in, I think, when I started to use alcohol as a medicine.
Yeah.
Um, and then so I did my studies in Brighton. I moved to London. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty wild at that point. I had to do a fair bit of amends to people of that era because I was very argumentative. I was very opinionated. Like I'd go out with my brother and his mates, and I'd just be a bit, very annoying, basically. Lots of blackouts, lots of like waking up at the end of the tube stop and not remembering, like lots of going to events with friends of mine and then just being really quite rude to their friends and stuff like that. Um, and then I was seeing a guy in London and he was, you know, he just wasn't into anything serious, which was fine, but it wasn't what I wanted, I guess. And a friend of my brother's was going down to Brighton for this kind of random Fat Boy Slim thing, which was happening on the beach.
Yeah.
So like I was like, oh fine, I'll come because I knew some friends who were having a party, went down, and that's actually when I met my husband that night, about 3 in the morning. Um, and yeah, so we got together when I was 22. My husband's French, so we lived together in Brighton for about 4 years before we moved to France. None of his friends really liked me. I mean, I was a pretty Marmite person kind of in life. Like I had good mates, but then I had people who really fucking didn't like me, which I understand because I was quite unlikable. I was very, very like argumentative, aggressive, rude, judgmental, but just thought I was the shit. Um, Obviously, because I was massively, massively insecure, but
Yeah, and there's an element of like that was the time as well, right? That whole ladette thing that fed into that narrative of what a strong, like strong woman, independent woman should be like. I feel like that of the 90s was a thing as
yeah, that's true. I hadn't
well.
seen it through that lens, but yeah, for sure, it was a lot about being cocky and like drinking with the lads, and I can drink 5 pints, and we used to drink, you know, Guinness and black, Guinness with no Guinness and port, so Guinness with shots of port in it, pints. I mean, I don't know how I managed to like get as much alcohol in my system as I used to be able to do. It's kind of quite wild, really. Yeah, it was a hugely kind of hedonistic time. And then, so we moved to France when I was 25, just before I was 26. I'd kind of like, we'd started dabbling with like taking, months off drinking. Um, I definitely put on quite a lot of weight. I was quite unhappy with myself. Like my husband's quite a natural coach, so he's very much like, well, something's not right, you do something about it. Um, and that was new to me. It's not something that I wasn't pushed as a kid. It was very much like, oh, world is scary, stay
Yeah.
safe kind of thing. Um, and yeah, so we'd had little bouts of not drinking, and then got to France, didn't know anyone, didn't speak French, and found out I was pregnant. So I was 3 months pregnant when we arrived. Didn't drink through my first pregnancy. Um, had my daughter when I was 26. And I think there's a couple of things I remember at that time. I remember getting back from the hospital with this newborn and my husband giving me like a nice bottle of wine, like a nice glass of wine, and it tasted like cream, and it was just like, oh my God, thank God.
Yeah.
And I think I got really quite drunk that first week that I was back from the hospital. I mean, looking back now, I was hugely traumatized. Having her really kind of kicked off a lot of kind of suppressed trauma because I had this little girl that now I had to keep safe in the world, and it was like completely overwhelming because the world hadn't been safe for me. Um, and then I think yeah, was, kind of drink, I guess, sort of back to binge drinking some. Yeah, no, I definitely was. I was back to binge drinking. I've got a lot of regret around breastfeeding and, stuff I wish I hadn't have done at that time. And then I had my son 19 months later. Um, and I think yeah, I mean, I just was very unwell. I mean, I did do some things good, like luckily. Um, but I was really struggling. And I think that's when I kind of started to, drink a lot more regularly to kind of knock me out. I wasn't sleeping. Um,
I imagine it must have been quite a lonely time as well, right? Because moving to a new country, and sounds like you've moved quite a few times anyway within the UK. Moving to a new country, it's isolating, right? When we don't speak the language.
yeah.
It's fantastic, and it's also really tough here too. Um,
Yeah, I was hugely lonely and didn't have any support. Like I didn't have,
yeah,
either
and
of
then
my
you become
parents close.
and it people don't talk about the loneliness that comes with parenting, with newborns, with kids under kind of 3, 4. It is really isolating.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be, but it can feel like it if we're not living in that same space. And that kind of the opposite of addiction is connection. And a lot of the time that isolation I feel when I work with people, that's where it kind of really starts to kick off.
Yeah. It became my friend, it became my ally, it became my treat, it became something to look forward to.
So
Um,
talk to me a little bit about then your husband being a Frenchman, how that, because the French culture is really different to the UK culture in terms of drinking, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, he worked away, so he had a new job, so he was away a lot as well. I mean, part of the reason why, because he lived in England for 7, 8 years, part of the reason why he liked England was because we had more of a kind of fun, boozy culture. So
Yeah.
we definitely kind of had that together. That was something that bonded us as a couple. Um, but yeah, he also really likes fine wine. We have, a wine cellar. He collects wine. Not so much anymore because well, he doesn't have anyone to share it with. I mean, he does collect it, but like he doesn't, he does still drink, but he drinks very, very differently now. Um, yeah, and I think then I went back to I just really wasn't I I wasn't great at being a stay-at-home mum. I found it intellectually, challenging again because I didn't really have any kind of friends or whatever. So then when I got offered a job to go back to work, it was like, oh, it just felt brilliant because I was using my brain again and again that kind of validation that I'd seeked from people and um, so I went pretty much into like a full-time teaching job. I got, 3 jobs in 3 different private, very kind of prestigious business schools. And I mean, it was an absolute like shit show. The kids both, they had chicken pox one after the other the first semester of the first year that I was teaching. So I missed like, you know, 5 weeks off or something. And it was this constant thing of like my husband had to be away and he had this new job and he was earning the money and all of that stuff. So it was always me that had to compromise. It was always me that had to like I just remember so many times being in the middle of the night with one of the kids like puking, just being like, oh my God, this is like a disaster. Can I like put give them paracetamol and just get them into school for the morning? Because, when you work in a business school, like everything was sort of leading up to an exam. So they'd have exams, midterm exams, final end of semester exams. So you were the whole program was so tight that if
Yeah.
you miss one session, it was like, just
Yeah,
it was
but and it leads into that kind of that constantly chasing your tail, constantly
yeah,
failing at either parenting or working, right? Like it's such a difficult role to play.
yeah. And I really had very kind of um strong views around having to do it all. And again, this feeds into that kind of, I feel like the 90s was that period of okay, you wanted to be emancipated as women. There
Yeah,
you go. This,
yeah,
feminist, well done. Here's the keys to work, but we're not going to give you any support to be able to do this. So it was like, right, I've got a, pretty much a full-time job with marking, with, a lot
yeah,
of, I mean, it's very paying fee school, I think it's about 25 grand a semester, so it was like the kids that are coming there have very high expectations, as do the parents. Um, so yeah, it was, and the other thing with that was that I kind of found myself like I was good at it, I was good at being a teacher, and I had English colleagues, so it was just. I had one friend who was about the same age as me, big drinker, same music, so we just go to the bar after work, and living in northern France, so you've got all those Belgian beers that are super strong. So I ended up kind of, I would work all day because it was a business school, in my heels and like, kind of tottering around in my dress, kind of like felt slightly attractive again, have all these young students that I really bonded with and thought I was cool. Um, and then go to the bar for a couple of drinks, the one drink that would always lead into like four, and then I would have to run home, to the creche to pick up the kids. I'd be like, a little bit pissed. I mean, I always think now if I wasn't in the clothes that I was and, a white kind of middle class woman, like I think they would have picked me up because I'm sure I stank of booze a lot of times when I went and picked up the kids. And then I'd like get the kids home, they'd be hungry, be like kind of like, and then you're sobering up, aren't you, at that point? It's that horrible point when you've had a few drinks and then you're kind of coming down. So then I'd have a glass of wine to like just hold me over, getting the kids fed. Wouldn't be eating anything they'd be eating, of course, because I'd be on a diet, no carbs, no bread, nothing like that. Yeah, and then get them like I wouldn't even have changed out of so I'm still in my heels, wouldn't have even changed out of that. And then like finally kind of get them to bed. And then I'd just like be so exhausted. I'm not going to cook myself something now. And I mean, I deleted most of them, but I think I still do have some photos where I'd just be like, there'd be like a bottle of wine and some chocolate. And I'd be like, okay, done. And I remember just sitting there, there was this specific dark chocolate with ginger, crystallized ginger in it, and I would have some chocolate and a bottle of red wine, and that would be me done. And then I'd pass out. Um, so I'm aware of time. So that was kind of where it went. And I guess my mental health got really bad. Um, and and then I would have these mad like weekends where I go back to England or, and all my friends. I mean, I had my daughter when I was 26, my son when I was 28, so we had all the 30th birthday parties that were all in
Yeah.
festivals in Croatia and like here, there, and everywhere. So I'd have these mad weekends where I'd go back, and doing drugs and then come back and have to look after the kid. It was really, really messy, and I just completely lost my sense of self. Like I knew I wasn't being a good mum. I knew I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to, but I didn't know any other way to be. And like at least when I was, there was familiarity in that chaos. It was what I knew. Um, I couldn't sleep, like I hadn't slept properly for, since I was 18, basically, since I was attacked. I had a lot because I got attacked at night and they broke into the room where I was sleeping. So I had a lot of anxiety around sleep. Um, and so I would knock myself out with wine. And then, yeah, I went to a couple of festivals. It was really messy. One that I think this was a real turning point that a friend and I, we went to this festival in the south of France. A friend of hers just kind of popped stuff in my mouth, and I'd always had friends that would tell me what I was doing and how much. And the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was backstage in A&E, like the A&E tent. And my friend and I just said to each other, like, let's not tell anyone, right? So I didn't tell my husband. Came back, mama, nothing. And I think that was when that kind of, the deception and not telling and hiding it and kind of, um, and then I decided at the end of that summer. So I think that was, I don't know, I'm not good with no, 30, I'm not good with timings, about 30, 32, I say, 31, 32. Um, I was like, right, I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to stop everything, stop smoking, stop drinking, like that. Um, and I now know that I went into withdrawal.
Okay.
At the time, I didn't know what was going on, but it was absolutely terrifying. And I was hallucinating, shaking. My
So,
husband was there, didn't know what was going on either, just kind of held me. And then he was, I was like, I need to go to the doctor. And he was like, okay. And I said, I can't tell him everything. Like, and he was like, well, why don't you write it down and I will tell him. So I wrote, this list of just like, I think I drink too much. I think I'm suicidal. I hate myself. I'm a terrible person. I'm depressed. I don't know. I don't sleep, like, because I was using like prescription sleeping tablets to try and help me sleep as well. Um, and yeah, and so I mean, I realised we haven't even got to like now. Um, we might have to do a two-parter. But yeah, basically that was, kind of the beginning of the end. I worked with my doctor, who thank, whoever was also an addiction specialist and a therapist. So I started going to see him twice a week. Um, he put me on antidepressants. I kind of stabilized, and in that time realized that I couldn't stop drinking, and I was thinking about wanting to stop drinking and I couldn't. Um, and then eventually, about a year into that kind of process, I real realized that I had, I'd Googled in the middle of the night, like, am I an alcoholic? Found Soberistas. So this is back in 2013, I think it was, when I first stopped. Managed to stop with that community after about 5 months of like backwards and forwards. Did a year, thought everything was better,
mhm.
weaned myself off antidepressants, moved to the seaside because I'd had burnout from work, and then started drinking again. And then I had about 3.5 years back and forth, which was absolute hell, that moderation period of like, oh, I know that I was better without it, but I don't quite know how to get back there. And like now I've got the taste back for it. And it's just like, but it doesn't look like it did before because I'm not drinking every day on my own, and then changing the parameters slowly. Parameters is a French word, isn't it?
Parameters.
Parameters.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I eventually stopped drinking in 2017. Is that right? 20, yeah.
Gotta
So,
be outright, yeah.
or 26, no, 2017, yeah.
Saying on a random date, right? Like as I say, you're 500 days more than me exactly, which I always think, right? Okay, so what date was it that you stopped drinking, and why that date?
Um, it was we were on holiday, and basically we'd rented on Airbnb, and so we'd done 3 weeks around Portugal and Spain. And sorry, I'm just sending you a text message. Very professional. Mid podcast, just to say we've got more time. Don't worry.
Okay.
Because I have a hypnotherapist appointment after this, but I managed to shift it. Um, and yeah, it was just that relentless summer drinking, like it got back to that point of, and it's very French, to have the aperitif and then have some wine with lunch, and then to have the aperitif and then have some wine with dinner, every day. Um, so every day for 3 weeks. And I'd kind of had this rule when I'd stopped in the past, when I was back and forth, that like if I woke up again at like 4 in the morning, sweating, hating myself, that was it. I had to stop. Um, and we'd always been really cautious with the kids in the pool. I think they were like 10 and 9 at this point. and we were in Spain, and the person that owned the pool had asked us not to take the cover fully off because it was like a manual, those metal covers. Um, and the kids were playing really nicely, and we were like, okay, look, I think we can just sit by the pool, and have the aperitif. And they seemed to be doing really well, and we did. And then my son jumped in to catch a ball, and he caught his eyebrow on the metal cover and like flipped back, nearly hit the side, didn't, and then there's blood everywhere because those sort of cuts just are.
Yeah.
And I literally was about to take a sip, of a drink. And so we went to hospital. We had to stay there till about 2 in the morning, so he got stitches on his eyebrow. And I just remember my husband in the car just saying, "Oh, thank God we hadn't had a drink."
Yeah.
And I was like, And then I woke up at 4 in the morning and I was like, that's it, I'm done. Like, luckily at that time, Soberistas, I think they might still have actually, they had like a free download of the first sort of 3 chapters of Annie Grace's This Naked Mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and reading that was just enough of that kind of mind shift just to be like, oh yeah, what am I doing? Like, I know this is terrible, like, kind of, because it's so frustrating being in that moderate, drinking, not drinking, because it's almost like, you manage to stop whatever that is. You have that click where you're just like, of course I can't do this anymore. Like, and then everything sort of spirals up and starts to get better.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, there's a meal or you feel anxious or, something happens and you go, oh, right, you don't have the capacity to,
You almost forget,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That conviction has
yeah, exactly. And then you have that drink and then it just all like spirals again. It just
and
unravels.
yeah, I mean, even you talking about the French having their apéro and their glass of wine, and it to me was always like it just wet the whistle,
Yeah.
and it was that whole thing. Once you pop, you can't stop. I can never, I still can't understand how do they do that? How do they not then just go crazy like we?
Yeah. And it was so boring. I mean, the end of that kind of 3 year back and forth period, I would go to events or dinner parties, whatever, and I'd just be like counting drinks,
Yeah,
watching other people, trying to match their drinking,
yeah.
really trying with all my might not to get drunk, eating, like feeding myself. I remember being at a party and this guy being like, you okay? You okay? Like really hungry because I just like literally have a sip and then like stuff something in my mouth just because I was so paranoid of getting drunk.
It sounds
Um,
so much fun, doesn't it? Isn't it interesting how we really, really fight for something, even when there's no joy in that, right? Like what you're
yeah,
describing, it's not we're drinking for fun. When we're at the point where there's an anxiety around why are these people not drinking so fast? Are they seriously going to put the cork back in that? And as you say, stuffing yourself, it's like that's not at some point when we're really radically honest with ourselves, this is not fun. I am now doing everything I can to protect
yeah,
this one
exactly.
thing.
And then I'd just get home, from that event, and then I'd like open a bottle of wine and drink like, one or two, and because I'd be like, ah, okay,
Yeah.
now I can relax. Now I can relax because no one can see how much I can drink and how much I want to drink. Um, Yeah, so I got sober in 2017, and initially it was amazing, and it was wonderful. And I blogged all about it on social media, and I met loads of friends, and I was like, this is the best thing. And I created a podcast, and I had a really brilliant, like, working relationship, and everything was great. I was super productive.
Riding that pink cloud.
Yeah, exactly. Wrote a couple of books, wrote courses, was like super kind of engaged in the sober community and was just like, this is, absolutely fantastic, like, best thing. And I mean, you talked about being that kind of poster child of sobriety, and I really resonated with that. It was that kind of like, yeah, come and join me, you know?
Everybody should be doing what I do.
Yeah.
This is the key to life.
And it, I mean, it definitely is. But then, I mean, in hindsight now, what I realize is that, you know, I put down drink. I mean, I'd stopped doing drugs at that point anyway, but I, you know, put down drink and I just picked up multiple other things. Like I hadn't done the healing work. I hadn't, you know, I'd been in therapy, or, you know, I'd pretty pretty much most of the time since kind of when I really had that bad breakdown in, you know, 2012 or whatever it was. But I hadn't done the sort of deep trauma work. I had a lot of still unprocessed stuff going on. I hadn't dealt with, you know, what I described at the beginning of being that little child that didn't know how to fit into the world by being herself, you know, like not sort of modulating herself to be something else, you know, and I very much, I mean, I'm a designated coach for She Recovers, which is an organization in sort of, well, international, but based in Canada and the US. And their kind of tagline is that we're all recovering from something, and you're kind of encouraged if you're sharing in a meeting to kind of list all of the things, right? Because it is multi-layered. And when I went to a conference that they did in LA, that was when I really kind of put the mental health trauma and kind of addiction triangle together. Um, so yeah, I mean, what do I identify being in recovery from now is a pretty long list. You know, I'm in recovery from addiction, codependency, workaholism, um, low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, complex PTSD. Um, there's probably more that I can't think of right now.
And it kind of it does, like, not to scare anybody that's on this journey. It is a fantastic journey, right? Um our reason for doing this podcast is that kind of the renewal of the vows to long-term sobriety. And
Yeah,
these
I mean, it gives me enormous gifts. Like I was, you know, I was so controlling about everything. You know, I didn't know how to have fun. I had no patience with my kids. I was like, not, I was so rigid about the way that I saw the world, you know, and so much has been this kind of opening up and this constant opening up. And it's, yeah, it's humbling, right? It's humbling to be like, you know, well, I thought I got it figured out. Oh no, I still
kind
do.
of like hits you like a bit of like a dumpster truck at some point, doesn't it? Of like, okay, fuck. I thought it was just removing the alcohol, but actually, what removing alcohol and drugs gives you is kind of that gift of recovery from the trauma. Because lots of people go through their lives and have the depression, the trauma, the PTSD, all of these things, and addiction or dysfunction in some way, it continues for their lives and they lose their lives to it. Like sobriety really gives you that gift of being able to recover to the best we can from these things.
Yeah, I mean, I always sort of describe it as that kind of, you know, it's my anchor or it's this the stick in the sand of like that makes everything else possible, you know. And I mean, I this is the way my brain worked, but you know, I was driving yesterday. Um, I just had a great morning and had nice chats with and then I had a really nice chats with my daughter in the car, dropped her off at a friend's house. You know, everything was great, beautiful sunny day. And I was like, I could die today and I'd be fucking satisfied, you know, and that's like, I don't get it every day. Do you know what I mean? And it's been really hard work. And I mean, they always say in A, you know, you get a life beyond your wildest dreams. And for a long time, I was like, what are you talking about? Um, but I do get days now where I'm like, fucking hell, because I wasn't great. I couldn't see my life. I wasn't grateful, you know, essentially. Like, I think when you, like, I had such like a hole in the soul, you know, from being a ch tiny child of like, I'm not good enough, that there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough. That no matter how good things, when you have that fundamental belief about yourself that you're not a good person and you're not worthwhile, you are going to do things to prove that to yourself. So my level of self-sabotage was just off the scale. Like my life was fucking
Self-fulfilling
great.
prophecy. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like, and that's prime example of like, you know, getting sober, like great, you know, liberation for this thing, and then filling my life to the point where I got into complete and utter burnout because there was still that fundamental belief in myself that I wasn't worth it. Um, and so the work now for me is that really kind of, you know, I mean, I've done 18 months of, you know, EMDR therapy every week. Like I made, it was almost like, you know, so we had the business and everything, you know, was going really, really well. And then I was getting unwell and I was, you know, unwell in my relationship with my business partner. You know, I wasn't treating her the way that she deserved to be treated or treating myself the way that I deserved to be treated in that you know, I put the business in front of everything, you know, and then I got resentful, right? Um, and that's not her fault at all. That's my level of my dysfunction. And I just kept, you know, I kept on doing that, but I just pick up other things. So it's like, right, okay, well, if I move, that would be better, you know. So I went through this massive obsession about moving to Spain, and then, you know, or like if I do this or achieve this, then it will be back, you know, this just constant. Um, and yeah, I kind of made this decision of like, actually, I got a shit load of privilege, you know, like my husband has a good job. I'm an educated, white, cisgendered woman. If I can't do the maximum I can to make myself okay, like I've got a fucking problem. And so it was like, okay, any money I'm going to make, it goes on therapy. Anything that I do, everything that I do, my purpose right now is trying to make myself okay, you know. So I stripped back work, I stripped everything away, and I was like, my, you know, any money that I have that isn't like, you know, food money, all of those things, you know, I don't like, I'm not like all this frivolous shit that we spend money on, you know,
Yeah.
creams, balms, fucking Botox, all of
Yeah.
this stuff. You can tell I'm getting animated now because the swears are coming out. I was like all of that is nonsense because I
That's
have the
not, yeah,
opportunity.
it's not self-care. Like it's being sold to us as self-care.
Yeah.
And actually, self-care is addressing our fucking behaviors,
Yeah,
addressing
yeah, exactly.
what has led to us leading in this dysfunctional way, or
Yeah.
allowing people to treat us in a certain way to step into those relationships.
And
If
not
we,
everyone has that chance, right? You know, and like that is a big understanding of like, you know, we're not going to heal the world if the people that have privilege don't do the work to like, you know, understand their part in things in order for them to be able to show up as better humans, you know. Um, so yeah, so I did a lot of therapy, a lot of EMDR, you know, left the business, left, you know, anything that was outward focused, anything that was ego focused, anything that was to do with me. I was just like, I cannot show up in that way anymore. Uh,
okay, so things shifted for you, right, as well, because you did didn't go through like 12-step the AA route, but things at some point shifted, and now that's a big part of your journey and your healing.
yeah, I mean, so essentially I'd kind of done all this work, you know, of healing and, you know, stripping back work, making, you know, work further down on the list. So it was like, right, sobriety first, family second, work third. I was kind of, but there was still this thing in me that I was just so discontent. I was so lonely. Like a lot of our friendship groups had changed here after COVID. I didn't really have any friends, and I just was still seeking, seeking, seeking. And I went to London. I'd been someone had nominated me for the coach of the, it was transformational coach of the year award, and I was like, this is fucking random. I was like, shall I go? Shall I not? I was like, I don't even know what this is. And my husband was like, yeah, you should totally go. So I went to London to this award ceremony, and with loads of people I didn't know. And it was really boozy, but I had like a nice time. And then I didn't win. So I was like, fine, I literally don't know what I'm doing here anyway. And then I got runner-up coach of the year. And it was just, oh my God, everyone's like, man, that's amazing. And I just sat there just going, I literally do not understand anything that's going on. Why are people applauding? Why is this a good thing? I didn't fucking win. And I went back to my hotel room and I just sobbed. And I was just like, I don't get anything that's going on. Like, why is this good? How can this be a good thing? Like, I didn't win, even though I didn't even know that I was nominated for this thing. And I had a friend in London who was, a really good sober mate. And I'd kind of made this decision. I was like, okay, right, new thing that I'm going to do that will fix things is I'm going to get a flat in London, and then I'll go back to London and that will make things better.
That will make me whole.
Yeah, exactly. That will fill a hole in my soul.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's France's fault.
It's lack of, yeah.
Um, and so I went to her place. It was just it was just so many different things. So we went to see a film. I never cry at films. It was a film that has like an addiction storyline. I absolutely bawled. Then we, and then we went for a drink, and she told me that she's started having a drink every now and again. And I could not compute it. I was just like, I cannot be anywhere near you, you know. I mean, it's fuck all to do with me whether she drinks or not, but I just could not, I wasn't strong. And so then I sobbed loads more, and I was like, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. I mean, she really didn't know what to do. I mean, I was suicidal again. I was like really, really, really low. Um, I messaged my husband and I was like, that's it. I need to get a place in London. And he was like, oh, okay, how, what's going on? It's just like, yeah, I hate France. You know, it's obvious. It's just like my life's amazing. It's just I was so lost. And then in the middle of the night, I was sleeping on her sofa. Normally I sleep upstairs. In the middle of the night, this guy started having like a psychotic breakdown outside her house, like literally outside her house, where she was um and he was like shouting and saying that he had a gun, and they ended up being like police outside and like four, riot vans. So it went on for like 3 hours. He didn't have a gun, but he was very, very unwell. Um, and so I didn't sleep at all. And then I got on the plane, and this woman was so incredibly drunk on the plane that she ended up getting escorted and taken off the plane. Um, and as I lay down to sleep, before all the stuff kicked off with this guy, you know, um, and the gun or no gun stuff, I lay down to sleep, and my brain went, well, if she can drink every now and again, maybe I can. And I hadn't had a thought like that in over 6.5 years. And I was like, what? you know. And so then all of this stuff came, it was happening, and I just sat on the plane, and I was like, I text my mate Rose, who's been in the program for like 12 years, and I said, Rose, I think I need to go to a meeting. I was just like, I just felt utterly broken and powerless, and just like, because I think when I'd created this community, I'd been this voice in the sober world or whatever, but I had no support system for myself at all. And I was still completely seeking some way to fix myself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so I went to a meeting and I was like, what's this? Oh my God. And I had a lot of shame that I was going. I, couldn't get my head around the God stuff. I thought like it was really embarrassing. I felt like I'd failed. And then I just started listening to other people's stories. And, I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic and all of this stuff. And then I just started listening to people. And I was like, oh, yeah, I get that. Oh, I get that too. Oh, weird. That sounds like me. Uh, Oh, right, okay. And when people describe an alcoholic, is it someone with neurodiversity? Quite possibly, it's a very similar description. But for whatever reason, it was just like, what, it became the question of like, what if I just go with the not knowing? Like, what does that look like? What if I take a chance not to have to be in the driver's seat of my life all the time? Like, what would that feel like if I just let go of the control of trying to fix everything? And I was like,
Hand it up
oh,
to,
yeah,
hand
you
it over.
and it's been amazing. And I've made really good mates, and I go to a meeting pretty much every day. Um, it's not for everyone. It's You do definitely have to find the right meetings. I went to a lot of meetings where I was like, I can't see myself in this group. Um,
I feel like almost our next episode could be around like this, the AA versus the sobriety coach, and because it's a brave step actually that you took of going to AA, because there's almost this snobbery around, but you can choose to stop drinking, especially with the sober influencer world at the moment. Like it's such a thing, and this is why, again, part of the reason for the podcast, right? Of knowing that actually it is definitely a patchwork recovery.
yeah,
Certain things work for certain people, and your experiences change as you go through it. And what does long-term sobriety look like? So I think it'd be really interesting for us to talk about that a little bit more, maybe next week.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm all right, everyone. To end, I'm doing okay. And
Okay.
I really am. And like it's it's all learning, and I'm grateful for all of it. And I have a really blessed, beautiful life. So yeah.
And the next few years of long-term kind of what long-term sobriety, because you'll be, yeah, the next massive milestone for you is 10 years, right?
Yeah. Um, I mean, we were talking about this before we came on air, like not that we're on the radio, but you know what I mean? I think it's about reclaiming. Well, this interestingly, as a coach, like I'm doing my accreditation at the moment, and I had a brilliant mental session yesterday, and we talked about the fact that a lot of my life I've been blagging it basically. Like I was so fearful of investing in something, investing in myself in case I didn't do it right. That sense of abandonment and rejection. So there's something at the moment around, this is what I wrote with her yesterday. Excellence is being engaged and committed to the development of skills and knowledge and your own human experience and trying your best. So the goal was, maintain excellence by slowing down, reflecting, investing in my learning. And then I wrote because I deserve it. And that is fucking huge. Like, so I think, yeah, for now it's about just really trying to remember every day to be in my life and
Yeah.
not try to escape it, because my life is actually quite nice. I don't need to, because all of that is old wiring. It's like I don't need to believe any of that stuff. I am not in danger, touch wood today, and that. has taken a lot of work and a huge amount of compassion, because I essentially abandoned that girl who was 18 and said, "I don't ever talk about this."
Yeah.
Essentially said to her, "You've done something wrong and you need to shut up."
Yeah.
And, it took me so much to understand that, and to heal that relationship with, those
And
parts.
understanding and protecting that girl at the
Yeah,
time
exactly.
best way you knew how. Whereas now you have different tools,
Yeah,
thanks to being able to be present in your mind and body.
yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry it was a bit long. I tried to.
So what we didn't touch on, we will do next week, is your decision to come off Instagram as well,
Ah, yes.
which was kind of another driving force in this kind of podcast. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But thank you, Mandy, for sharing your story.
Thanks for hearing me.
You're welcome. And that's it.
Yes, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you then.